Then this most holy land, the seat of places consecrated to divinity, and of temples, shall be full of sepulchres and dead bodies. O Egypt, Egypt, fables alone shall remain of thy religion, and these, such as will be incredible to posterity, and words alone shall be left engraved in stones, narrating thy pious deeds. Kemet, the land known in today's time as Egypt, a mysterious world filled with rich history and practices which have been lost to time. If not for the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 by French expeditionaries, we may have never unearthed the key to decoding the strange symbols of Egyptian hieroglyphics. In the words of Manly P. Hall, an alphabet is not a language. The religions and philosophies of the ancient Egyptians have not been released. The lips of Kem are sealed with the dust of time. Although we can't know for certain the exact practices of the ancient Egyptians and their spiritual rites, we can receive a glimpse of them through the harmonious pairing of archaeology and tradition. This is the story of Freemasonry of the ancient Egyptians, as told by Manly Palmer Hall. Before we begin, I want to add that he also mentions in the subtitle that there is an addition to this book. He adds a personal interpretation of the rites of the Krata Rapoa, which is also known as the 7 higher degrees of Egyptian Freemasonry. Its original prayers and rituals have been lost to time, but there are still modern groups within the Masonic umbrella who are said to take inspiration from the original rituals of the ancient Egyptian priests. To start, it is important to note that Freemasonry is a fraternity built upon the hallowed grounds of the Judeo-Christian faith. Its main structure is based on the allegories and degrees of the craftsmen guilds of whom built the great temple of King Solomon, the king of Israel and Judea, and the prophet to the people therein. He was of the line of David, who was his father. Solomon, along with the king of Tyre and his master builder Hiram, created perhaps the greatest feat of architecture in recorded history, with over 100,000 craftsmen at their disposal. The first temple of Jerusalem was a place built to house the Ark of the Covenant, the vessel which carried the knowledge of God passed to humanity through the prophet Moses. Through the studies and commentary of Manly Hall, we can get an understanding of the effects of Freemasonry in ancient Egypt. Hall quotes Father Kircher, a Jesuit Egyptologist, who states that in Egyptian religion, Isis and Osiris are the equivalent to the Semitic Adam and Eve, with the betrayer of Osiris, Typhon, being Cain, the first to murder in biblical texts. His theological background of Egypt and Christianity was a philosophical marriage of belief systems, similar to the tie between Roman and Egyptian religions when Pluto established Serapis, Zeus and Osiris in one. An early Christian writer by the name of Origen, who was once a pagan philosopher, writes, "The Egyptian philosophers have sublime notions with regard to divine nature, which they have kept secret and never discovered to the people but under a veil of fables and allegories." This is where the connections can start being made. I am a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason myself, and have therefore taken part in the mysteries of the Masonic degrees, which in nature are but allegorical stories, retold over centuries in lodges across the world. The first part of Hall's commentary on Egyptian Freemasonry involves Egyptian magic, the greatest of the arts among Kemet. He describes first in detail the Osirian mysteries and the resurrection of Osiris by his consort Isis. She used spells and incantations to deliver his dead soul back into his physical body, which was pieced together from 14 severed parts. He then talks briefly about the curse that was written upon the tablet near the entrance of the tomb of Tutankhamun, which read, "O ye beings from above, O ye beings from below, phantoms riding the breasts of men, Ye of the crossroads and ye of the great highways, let them be destroyed who attack my name, my foundation, my effigies, the images like unto me. Now, there is common disagreement as to whether or not those who died after the opening of King Tut's tomb were killed by a curse or simply through other causes, but it does seem a bit strange that multiple people who were involved did meet their demise shortly after. These two cases show that Egyptian magic was used for both good and evil purposes, depending on who was receiving the effects. There is also mention of the Egyptian priests' enlightenment into the practice of animal magnetism and the laws of attraction, that invisible fields of energy tie us all together, and that the priests could manipulate these fields to influence those around them. Perhaps this is why the method of storing the dead into the afterlife was to put a heavy metal or stone sarcophagus surrounding them, to keep in what they believed to be magnetic energy which flowed through their very soul. Albert Pike, famous Freemasonic author and Civil War general, was famously quoted as saying, "Magic is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws." The ancient citizens of Kemet had a special class of people whose families honed the surreal powers of the ancients over the course of centuries, perfecting the craft and traversing the plains of esoteric knowledge like an experienced ship captain. The next part of the book is related to the Osirian Cycle, which can be summarized in just a few words: birth, life, death, and resurrection, the same as the Passion of Jesus Christ. See, Osiris was said in Egyptian mythology to have been born of the primordial sky goddess Nut and the earth god Geb in Ro-Seto, the western necropolis near Memphis. Ro-Seto is considered to be a sort of gate or threshold which divides the earthly realm from the realms of the underworld. His life bears an uncanny resemblance to that of Christ, and by virtue, the experience of the initiate. Life, death, and rebirth, the Holy Trinity represented, with the Father bringing life to the Son bearing the burden of death, and the Holy Spirit rising from the Son's tomb. The story of Osiris is explained in detail in my previous video, The God Connection Part 1, but to summarize, Osiris is betrayed by his brother Typhon, who seals him inside of a coffin and throws him into the Nile. He floats dead inside of the box until it is consumed by a tree. His wife Isis recovers his body, and in taking it to be resurrected, it's stolen from her. His body is cut into 14 pieces which are spread across the land. All parts except for his phallus were recovered by Isis, and because of this, she was unable to fully bring him back to life. Instead, he presides over the dead souls in the underworld, wrapped in linen to keep his body together. Life, death, resurrection. This section also touches on Isis caring for her son Horus, who had been hidden from Osiris's killers, lest he fall victim to the same fate. These accounts were perhaps best recorded by the Greek philosopher and historian Plutarch. The fourth chapter relates to the secret doctrine of Egypt, when Plutarch wrote of the history of Egyptian mythology and the Osirian Cycle. He was writing it under the bias of being an initiate of the Temple of Delphi. The Temple of Delphi was a place where the most learned went on request to gain esoteric knowledge. After all, the Princess Pythia, better known as the Oracle of Delphi, resided in the temple and gained massive amounts of interest through her talent of clairvoyance and psychic mentalism. It is not an unfair assumption to make that she passed down her knowledge and her abilities to the priests of her temple, which were later known simply as the Brotherhood. The term Brotherhood is a term which is widely used in Masonic fraternities today, with the term brother being used to describe any member within the global family. Hall explains that Plutarch's involvement within the temple limits his ability to write truthfully, or at least the whole truth, He also goes in depth by saying that the true rituals of ancient Egypt would have largely been tainted by the time of Hellenistic Ptolemaic Egypt. The basis of this doctrine relates to the Osirian myth being used in allegory during the initiation rites of ancient Egyptian Freemasons, similar to the story of the Master Builder in modern Masonry. The early Greek lawmaker Solon, who was alleged to have spoke the now extinct Atlantean language, had close relations with the ancient Egyptian priests, and was told a very powerful yet cryptic message from them. "O Solon, Solon, you Greeks are always children. There is not one Greek who is an old man." Of course, the priest was not talking about literal age, but instead a more mental age, which is matured in years of understanding and enlightenment. Solon brought the information he had taken, how little or how few, with him back to Athens, which ignited the world of Greek philosophy and the advancement of mystery schools. The basis of Egyptian priesthood is summed up by 3 words: geometry, mathematics, and philosophy. It was well understood by our ancient Egyptian brothers that all things in this world are created with geometry, measured by mathematics, and understood by philosophy. This type of knowledge is primordial knowledge, the knowledge which began with Osiris and was passed through the ages in a line of esoteric succession to the priests themselves. Hall writes in poetic fashion a few lines of the symbolism of Osiris. Osiris becomes a dual symbol, being the first place of esoteric wisdom itself, and in the second place, the composite order of initiates, through whom the tradition was perpetuated. The personality of Osiris thus typifies the institution erected by the ancients to perpetuate the deathless truths of the soul. The living head was crowned with the plumes of wisdom and power. The hands bore the scepters of 3 worlds, but the body was bound with the mummy wrappings of the dead. Here we find spirit, the living head, bound incongruously to matter, the mummified body. Osiris represented the secret doctrine prior to that time when the omnific word was lost. Thank you for joining us again on the Eleusinian Society. I was going to make the review of this book under one video, but I think there's so much detailed content that we really need to go through, so I'm going to split it up into 2 or 3 parts. The next video will be on the actual ceremonies and rituals of Egyptian Masonry itself, at least according to Manly P. Hall. So make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when we post our next video. Thank you.